What's up, everybody? Matt Maran here for another weekly updates. There's lots of exciting news to go over here this week. We got talk of, increased GR Corolla production, which is great. New Toyota MR2 rumors. There's new talk of this new Dodge last call vehicle. Crazy M5 rumors. All kinds of interesting stuff. So stay tuned for all that and more. But first off, like I said, Toyota has officially announced this week that they will be increasing production of the GR Corolla due to the very high demand for the model and the Circuit Edition in particular. And so Toyota says they'll be increasing production and that they'll continue to offer the Circuit Edition for the 2024 model year as well. It was originally only going to be a 2023 model year limited run thing, but they're going to also build them in 2024. But they didn't specify how many more they're going to build. They just reiterated that they're going to be making 1,500 Circuit Editions for the 2023 model year. So you got 1,500 of those. Whether that means they're increasing production of the regular GR Corollas for the 2023 model year, or if this increased production is planned for the 2024 model year with, more Circuit Editions possibly, or just potentially building more of the GR Corollas, for the base versions or the Morizo. We'll have to wait and see. I think the Morizo will stay limited, but maybe they'll just, boost the number of regular GR Corollas. We'll have to see, but don't expect too many because these are still hand-built vehicles. And so as a result, that means that you're not going to have huge production numbers on these ever. They never were going to be mass produced on a large scale. They never will be, but any kind of help is helpful nonetheless. And so if, it helps people to have a slightly shorter wait time for these vehicles, then I think it's great news. And hopefully this means that more people can get them sooner, and maybe it'll actually help with the markups a little bit as well. If there's a few more of them out there and dealers start getting allocated a few more potentially, we'll have to see. But anyway, still good news nonetheless. Either way, just even if they only are planning to build 10 more, that's still a win in my book. So great to hear that. For some unofficial good news here from Toyota, potentially, Best Car Magazine in Japan is claiming that Toyota is partnering with Suzuki and Daihatsu to build a new MR2. And so they claim that Toyota will be supplying the chassis, and the wheelbase is supposedly going to be 5 inches longer than the old MR2 Spider, and the body is going to be about a foot longer, an inch wider, and an inch lower, is what they're claiming. The magazine says it would use the front suspension from the Yaris and a 1-liter turbo 3-cylinder from the Suzuki Swift that will be the engine. They'll be paired up with a mild hybrid electric motor system that'll both be running through either a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed automatic. And that motor only does 118 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque in the Swift. But if potentially there's a turbo 3-cylinder or enough space in this engine bay for a turbo 3-cylinder, there could potentially be, an option to have a GR version of this that maybe has 300 horsepower someday. There's a potential there, we'll see. But anyway, they also are claiming that it's going to have a targeted curb weight of just 2,200 pounds. So that would be about 150 pounds lighter than a 2023 Miata. So that would help to offset the lower power, but I mean, even still, it's going to be slower than a Miata if it has way less power and it's only 150 pounds lighter. So, it's like the old MR2 Spiders, though. It's going to be, for people who are just okay with something that isn't super fast and just really love that, light handling. But I think the Miata really has that market cornered. So it's going to take a lot to maybe sway people away from the Miata into this. But one thing that could potentially help sway people is that they're claiming the price of this thing is planned to start around $20,000 or even slightly under, depending on the exchange rates, which would be pretty crazy. I think with the current exchange rates, it could potentially be as low as like 17,000 or just even under 17,000, supposedly. Now, that's one of the perks of having a tiny little engine, not a ton of power. And if you have it truly bare bones and small and you do part sharing and partnerships, all those things help to drive the cost down. Whether or not I can truly get that cheap that's going to be tough to do, but I guess it seems like it may be possible. We'll see. But if this all sounds very Japanese and sounds like something we probably won't get in the States, you're probably right. So certainly don't get your hopes up for something like this to come to the United States. But Toyota's been doing some awesome stuff, we weren't sure we were going to be getting any kind of GR thing as far as what the Yaris, had overseas, and we ended up getting that here with the Corolla. Toyota's been on a roll with these very hot vehicles, and so there's a potential that, we could end up actually getting this vehicle, but I certainly wouldn't put money on it just yet. But Toyota at least is cool enough that I think there's a better chance of Toyota doing this than some other car company, ever bringing back like a Fiero or something for Chevy. I think there's a decent chance of this happening. But we'll have to see, and it also complicates things though if it's going to be a branded thing where Suzuki gets a version and Daihatsu gets a version as well. There would be some missing out there of those other two brands not being in the States, and so therefore, Toyota would definitely be able to have the higher volume vehicle. But anyway, we'll see about all that, and whether they want to spend the money to bring it over here is a whole other thing too. So it's a whole big thing, but maybe even if it doesn't come here, it could be, something fun to at least see from afar that, hey, there was a new MR2, we just couldn't get it because of American culture and the stuff that like American consumers actually want. But anyway, interesting to hear that rumor. For some other interesting stuff, this one's definitely on the interesting side. Dodge has begun weekly teasers for their final last call model that's coming. That'll be announced here at Roadkill Nights Vegas on March 20th is when they're going to be fully revealing this final model, which had some motor issues when they were developing it, and supposedly they worked those issues out, and so they're ready to finally debut this final call. And so the teasers, though, are very bizarre, as you can see, showing a red-eyed leprechaun getting an injection of gold liquid to go through a Jekyll and Hyde transformation. And so the best guess in the comment section on YouTube there for this video is saying that, it could probably be a red-eye version of the demon, which makes sense. It's basically like a demon that's set up for the street and not the track. And also there's been talks of this thing running E85 and having 909 horsepower. So, it's probably some combination of all those things, most likely. It could still also be a Charger, though, and they could throw us a curveball and could end up being a Charger instead of a Challenger. But I don't know what they're planning here. But at least we only have less than a month to wait to finally see this thing, and we'll have weekly teasers here over the next few weeks as well. So stay tuned for another bizarre teaser next week. But very interesting with the way they're doing the teasers on that one. But another very fast car that has officially become the fastest accelerating production car in the world is the Pininfarina Battista. And so Autocars magazine, their India division, clocked an 8.55 second quarter mile time and a 13.38 second half mile time thanks to the Battista's 1,873 horsepower and smooth aerodynamics. So it edged out the Rimac Navara, which I guess had the previous record by 0.03 of a second. So basically as fast as the Rimac Navara, but technically it's slightly faster. And so the driver said it's like being shot from a cannon, which certainly seems to make sense, especially considering this thing has a 1.79 0 to 60 time. So less than 2 seconds. 1.79 seconds is wild. And so further illustrates that, comparison of being shot out of a cannon. Seems amazing. I would love to have a reaction to that someday. That would be a very fun review. But anyway, congrats to the Pininfarina team, and cool to hear that. Two other very fast vehicles, although not quite as fast, but very fast, that were revealed this week here is the 2024 BMW X5M competition and X6M competition. So the important thing to know here is that the regular M versions aren't offered anymore. Only the competition versions here are what we're getting now, which seems kind of odd since it's an SUV and not everyone probably wants the stiffer ride for the competition version. But anyway, it gets visual tweaks similar to the other X5 and X6 models I discussed last week, with new front ends, new back ends, along with new screens and interior design. Mechanically, they now get a 48-volt mild hybrid system that can add 12 more horsepower and 147 more pound-feet of torque when starting, but it is primarily just for a smoother and longer start-stop operation, because the peak power from the 4.4-liter twin-turbo V8 is still the same 617 horsepower, 553 pound-feet of torque, and even the 0 to 60 time remains the same exact 3.7 seconds, so that electric motor clearly isn't helping performance in any kind of significant way, but they also get more bracing now to make them more rigid, the shocks are retuned, and otherwise though, the brakes are unchanged, as is the rest of the performance hardware. And so production starts in April, and prices start at $123,295 for the X5M and $128,195 for the X6M. And for some unofficial BMW M news here, Car and Driver put out a report last week about the new M5 that they say will be arriving July of 2024. So their intel seems to be pretty exact with all of the dates and numbers. So I'm assuming this is pretty credible info, but still take it with a grain of salt because this is still just their report, their claims. from their sources, whatever, so anyway, it sounds wild, whatever they're planning here. They claim it'll get the powertrain setup from the XM, meaning it'll be a twin-turbo V8 paired to a plug-in hybrid setup that can do 735 horsepower and 735 pound-feet of torque total. And supposedly the M5 will also be getting the label red designation as standard, which is interesting because why not just call it the M5? I don't get why the label red thing. Supposedly that's like the only version. It's not like the label red will be higher and be separate. There is no base M5 supposedly for this new one. It's that they're all going to be label red. So I feel like, why do you need an extra designation if it's not designating it from anything else? But anyway, they want to put the label red badge on it, whatever. It should also do about 60 miles of range, supposedly. But the trade-off here is that Car and Driver is claiming that it'll weigh over 440 pounds more than the current M5, which isn't a featherweight to begin with, and then they're adding another 440 pounds. That's gonna make it pretty heavy. So one pleasant surprise though is that the touring wagon version will be returning supposedly, and BMW is supposedly considering bringing the wagon here to the States, which would be awesome, and certainly would help make up for the weight gain. If it's like, well, but yeah, you can get in a wagon now. That'll certainly drive some people out of the shadows and get them purchasing vehicles, I'm sure. At least a few people. Everyone says they want wagons. We'll see how many people actually put their money where their mouth is. I think Audi RS6 Avant sales are doing okay, but I haven't seen any exact numbers on those. But hopefully it's been worth Audi's trouble to bring it over here. But anyway, getting back to the BMW here. The last juicy bit of this whole Car and Driver report here is about the i5M that's also in the works. And this thing is wild from what it sounds like here. So they claim it's codenamed Katarina, and while past rumors have suggested 1,000 horsepower, apparently those rumors were too conservative because the Car and Driver intel, they're claiming it'll do 1,136 horsepower and have the 4 motors and also have a highly advanced control unit that's internally being called the Hand of God, supposedly, that provides computing for wheel-by-wheel torque vectoring, piloted drifting, which sounds like autonomous drifting to me, like, or you have to be in the car, but it does it for you, maybe? I don't know. There wasn't any kind of explanation given for that. But piloted drifting and the ability to do tank turns, among other things. So it'll just spin like a top, which is gonna be very wild and would definitely make me sick if I ever had the chance to do that. But anyway, sounds very wild. It's all still a little bit of a ways off though, with Car and Driver claiming it won't come before 2026. So a little bit of time there for the M5 to shine before the i5M comes and just makes it look like child's play compared to this i5M, it sounds like. So anyway, that's very exciting to hear that, and a very interesting report by Car and Driver. Back to some official German luxury sedan news, though. Mercedes has begun the official rollout here of the all-new 2024 E-Class this week. And so this week we get a look at the new interior design here, which includes what they're calling the Super Screen. So it's not quite as impressive as the Hyper Screen and the EQ models. And so in this, you'll see there's a separate gauge cluster instead. So that's why it's not considered a Hyper Screen, because it's not all, one big thing there. But there's no dimensions given for these screens yet either. And this will also be an optional upgrade with the passenger display going away and a smaller center screen being swapped in on those base models. But we'll see if the base models bring back some buttons, because as you can see here in the pictures, otherwise on these super screen cars you get a little row of capacitive touch buttons and that's it. And so not ideal there. We'll see how that all plays out, but I think a lot of E-Class buyers will miss their knobs and wheels and all that. But anyway, the screen will also provide a next generation navigation experience thanks to a new partnership with Google they just announced this week that uses AI to improve the experience and provides things like location details right on the infotainment screen. So if you pull up a restaurant, it'll tell you the hours, phone number, all that kind of stuff, in addition to just being like, here's the address, here you go, and navigating you to it. It gives you some extra stuff, which is cool. The screen can now also play YouTube videos, only while parked, I'm assuming, but if you're happy to sit and hang out in your E-Class for whatever reason, and you're bored on a Friday afternoon, you can watch a weekly update in your E-Class here pretty soon, which will be fun. And also it can run apps like TikTok and Angry Birds, hopefully only while parked once again, because that's the last thing we need is people flipping through TikToks while they're driving, but that they'll have at least that functionality in some way. And also you can even Zoom and WebEx video conference with this thing, thanks to a new selfie camera that's mounted on the dashboard there. Again, I'm assuming that's while parked. I'm not sure why you wouldn't just use FaceTime or something, or use your phone to do a video conferencing thing if you are parked. And I mean, I guess you could do it while driving and just do it like a phone call, as long as they're not actually showing you a video of what's going on the center screen, because that would be distracting. But I don't know how that's going to be worked out. We'll see. But anyway, that's certainly a new thing though that no one else I think has offered yet. So bravo to them for thinking outside of the box, I guess. And so on top of that, the passenger screen also has a visual shield so that the driver is unable to see that screen and be distracted by it. And the eye monitoring cameras that it uses for the adaptive cruise and all that, those can see if you're looking at the passenger's display, and will actually just dim the passenger's display even more to discourage you from looking over if it sees that you're looking over. Other new interior touches are a Burmester 4D stereo that has Dolby Atmos surround sound, and that system will be further enhanced by a light show with the new active ambient lighting system that will be syncing the lighting with the music. Hopefully it's not too distracting though if you have like this whole like dance party going on in your car automatically, just going to the beat of the music. I mean, it sounds really cool. We'll see again just how pronounced it actually is in practice. But anyway, that's all the info we have here so far. Mercedes says the new E-Class will be in dealers before the end of this year, so expect a rollout of the rest of the vehicle here in the next few weeks or months. I remember with the S-Class, last year, I feel like, it was like a few features we'd get every week or two, and it was this gradual drip for a month or two, and then they finally revealed everything. But by that point, we had already seen most of it anyway. So they kind of like doing these anticlimactic reveals, but there's a lot to digest here, so I totally understand breaking it up into bite-sized pieces, I guess. But anyway, interesting to see the new E-Class there on the horizon. Another quick little Mercedes announcement here is that the S580e that was previously available in Europe is now going to be here available in the US here for the 2023 model year. So it's about $1,500 cheaper than the twin-turbo V8 version, and instead gives you the 3-liter turbo inline-6 and electric motor combo for 510 horsepower total and 553 pound-feet of torque. And even though that's a little more power than the V8, for some reason the V8 is still the 0 to 60 king, clocking a much faster 4.4 seconds 0 to 60 compared to the 5.1 seconds of the plug-in hybrid. It runs a 21.5 kilowatt hour battery for roughly 40 miles of electric range, and will be starting at $123,700. And they're available to order now, and they'll begin arriving at dealers in the first half of this year. Bentley has had a sad announcement here this week. So they've announced the end date for their W12 engine. So even though Bentley has previously said that they were only going to they're going to solely plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles by 2026. But they're going to be ending the W12 before then, because instead it'll end its 21-year run next year for the W12, with the final W12 engine vehicle scheduled to be produced in April of 2024. So we still have a little over a year here to get your orders in for a W12. Bentley, if you're on the fence and you're fortunate enough to be in that position, don't procrastinate. Go order one now. But its ultimate form, as many of you already know, is in the Better, where it does 740 horsepower, 737 pound-feet of torque. But Bentley says there are still limited order slots available for regular W12 Bentleys. So if you want any of the speed versions of the Bentleys, those get the W12. And then also if you're going, and they're available with the V8 as well, so you option up the W12 for those. And if you get the Mulliner on the Flying Spur or the Continental GT, you can also get the W12 still in that, again, with limited order slots available here for the next 14 months of production or whatever. So don't procrastinate. Get one if you can, for those of you who can afford it. But anyway, still very sad to hear that end date. I will save my drink of whiskey for the actual end of production in April of 2024, but still sad to see, a very unique and cool engine, a W12. What a way to think outside the box and do something really interesting. And it ended up being a great motor and, very powerful and impressive, and had a lot of great evolutions over its life as well. So really sad to see it go here, but at least there's one more year here of, production for it. And hopefully those final customers really spec some special cars as well. And while those EU regulations are one of the main drivers for why the W12 is going away, and all the other crazy gas-powered stuff is slowly getting phased out in Europe especially, there is some good news here this week as far as the EU rules are concerned. So while the EU is still banning the sale of internal combustion engines by 2035, or at least I think they specified gas and diesel stuff, and so they also are going to be still working on increasing the percentage of EVs every year, so it gradually ramps up to 100% by 2035. 2035 there. They said there still could be an exemption for, low volume manufacturers for that part. But the new development here this week is that they did approve an exemption for car companies that register less than 1,000 new vehicles each year. So that means Pagani, Koenigsegg, Bugatti, and any of those other smaller car companies in Europe will be able to continue on beyond 2035 like nothing's changed. So all the Paganis, all the Koenigsegg's, all that kind of stuff is safe. No worries for those car companies, and we'll still be able to have crazy cars and coffees even beyond 2035, because I'm assuming if the EU is going to let that go, then I'm sure California and everyone else will as well. So it sounds like that kind of stuff is safe. So cars and coffees will still be just as wild with ultra hypercars and stuff well into the future. And so good to hear that. And I mean, it certainly makes sense too, right? I mean, there's, dozens of these things that are built, every year mostly. And, they produce very little emissions because they're rarely driven. They're rare vehicles to begin with. Obviously that's not worth, killing a whole industry, for a minuscule microscopic amount of emissions. So I'm glad that the EU Parliament has, seen some reason here with these rules and, recognizes that there are some areas where you can't just do a blanket ban. It's just silly to do. So I'm glad to hear that. Italy is also pushing really hard to try to get an exemption because, of course, it's within Italy's best interest to have Lamborghini and Ferrari and those companies thrive. At least they got to win with Pagani. But, I think they're still trying to see if maybe Lamborghini and, Ferrari and companies like that could at least produce 1,000, gas-powered cars each year out of their 10,000 or 12,000 they build each year. Maybe if they can at least do 1,000 special edition things that are gas powered, that could still certainly be good for the brand. And, we'll see, but I don't know how that's going to play out and if that's actually going to happen. We also are still uncertain as far as the UK goes, because since they're now out of the EU, as far as, they have their own 2035 ban, there's talks that they're also, going to be potentially doing the same kind of exemption for, these cottage industry vehicles that are built in very small numbers like Morgans and stuff like that, so we'll see if that stuff ends up sliding through. I'm assuming they'll probably let that stuff go. Hopefully, we'll see. But anyway, so some good news there. And, I'm sure that helps Pagani and companies like that to relax a little bit as well. So very good to hear that news. Moving on to some regular car news here again. Cadillac has revealed the refresh for the 2024 XT4 this week, and it's a pretty impressive one here. So it gets a sharp new front end, there's new wheels, new colors on the outside. Inside it gets the 9K 33-inch OLED touchscreen from the Lyriq and the Escalade, and that new dash design to accommodate it, of course. And I mean, that is an impressive amount of screen for something that's as small as that is. I mean, this is the kind of thing that competes with like a BMW X1. And yes, they got, those bigger touchscreens as well. And, other companies are trying to work on, doing a more impressive interior. But I got to say, the XT4, I think, probably is going to be one of the top contestants as far as having the most impressive screens and the most impressive tech in this segment now with this. I really was not expecting that much of an upgrade. That is very, very impressive. So these will be arriving this summer here. There's no pricing for it yet. I'm assuming they got to get at least a little more expensive having that very expensive screen there in them, but we'll have to see. But very impressed they put that screen in there, and great to see that. There's also some good news here for Volkswagen Golf fans potentially this week, and could be good or bad, I guess, depending on how you feel about it. But Autocar is claiming that due to the lackluster response from customers and management to the ID vehicle names, which I don't blame them, ID, whatever, it doesn't sound super exciting. It sounds like Volkswagen is supposedly considering bringing back real names, at least for the Golf. So the new electric hatch that they're planning and working on was previously going to be called the ID2, but it's now rumored to be getting the Golf name. And this also kind of is working out to just end up being a Golf, because the ID2 was originally going to be kind of something based on the ID Life concept that came out back in 2020, but that vehicle supposedly got a cold reception. I personally thought it was a really cool little design, but supposedly their takeaway from that whole concept was that people did not like that design, did not want something like that, supposedly. So they went back to the drawing board. Supposedly it's just going to be a smaller hatch and be something that slots underneath the ID3, which is weird though, because the ID3 is already like a hatch. So to me, the ID3 is already more like a Golf. I feel like ID3 should be renamed Golf, and then ID2 should be renamed Polo. Maybe that's what the ID1 is going to be. I don't know. But anyway, they're supposedly eyeing up the Golf name to put on the ID2 here instead. And of course, I don't know what implications this has for a regular Mark 9 Golf, as far as, is that going to happen? Will there be a gas-powered one? Or is this just going to kind of take over and the market will be the last gas-powered Golf and, GTI and all that? I'm not sure. But if it does get the Golf name, then you can certainly bet on there being a GTI version. I don't think Volkswagen would let that go away. So we'll be getting a performance version of it, and hopefully that means it'll also come to the United States as well. And, so we'll see how that all plays out. This is, again, just a report that Autocar is claiming, so none of this is confirmed or, set in stone here just yet. But we'll have to just wait and see if these rumors end up being true. Volkswagen's other small hatchback, though, the ID3, is already up for its first refresh here, and Volkswagen has teased a quick look at the revised taillights here in a LinkedIn video, of all places. And so it was previously revealed that it'll get a more mature design, a new 12-inch infotainment system, and upgraded interior materials. And beyond that, we're not sure what else. Again, it's just a refresh, so it shouldn't have any huge changes. But anyway, we'll get the full debut of that next week, and I'll be covering it then. Subway this week. Yes, the restaurant has announced a Subway Oasis parks that they're planning to add to select restaurants here. And so as you can see, they'll include chargers, picnic tables, restrooms, green spaces, and playgrounds. And they didn't say how many of these they're planning or when they'll start building them, but they are already, they say, installing smaller chargers at their new and recently renovated Subway locations. So they're already putting some chargers in, but this whole Oasis thing, there's no specifics as far as that goes. So they could build 5 of those things, or they could build 1,000. I have no clue. But it's a very interesting idea, and this is something that I think makes a ton of sense. Starbucks and Taco Bell are the only other two that are jumping on this early. Starbucks partnered up with Volvo, and I'm not sure about all the Taco Bell stuff. I've just heard about it. But, it to me makes total sense, especially if you're putting these things along highways for EV road trippers. As someone who has road tripped in an EV in our Mach-E last year, if there's 2 different restaurants to pick from on the highway, one has a fast charger at it and one doesn't, there's no debate. We're going to the one that has a fast charger. It is an easy way to bring in, guaranteed buyers, basically, if you can justify the cost, because obviously these chargers are not cheap to put in, and especially a whole Oasis is certainly going to be very expensive. So it's just going to come down to cost benefit analysis as far as whether that actually is going to pay off. But to me, it makes a lot of sense to at least put 1 or 2 chargers at every fast food place along the highway if you're trying to get this growing EV buying demographic to stop there. Obviously EV buyers are still a very small percentage of the overall demographic, so that's probably why other companies are sitting on the sidelines for now. But I commend Starbucks, Taco Bell, and now Subway for getting in on this early. I think hopefully they'll kind of change this thing so that we can actually have more fast chargers in more convenient locations and make EV road tripping that much better. So very good to hear that. And there's also another report here for the final news story here from Car and Driver. This one claiming that Aston Martin is in talks with Lucid to partner up on electric vehicles and an electric vehicle platform to be specific, and also electric motors. Supposedly, Car and Driver claims Aston Martin already reached an agreement last month to buy electric motors from Lucid as well. So this whole partnership seems to make the most sense as far as Aston Martin needs electric stuff. They can't do it on their own, really. And, there's talks of other partnerships and things they're working on and stuff. There's some stuff with Geely and Lotus, I think I remember hearing. But, I think it just makes sense, partially because they're kind of both owned partially by the same people. So the Saudi Public Investment Fund owns a large chunk of both Lucid and Aston Martin. So kind of keep the partnership in the same friend group of, everyone kind of knows everyone and already works together a little bit, so that could certainly make sense. And with the Lucid Sapphire stuff already being like hypercar levels of performance, Aston Martin only needs half that amount of power to, be appropriate for an Aston Martin, honestly. And so I think, it's a very good idea from, at least on the surface here. And so we'll have to see, if that's something that ends up happening or not. Again, this is just a Car and Driver report, nothing confirmed or official yet, but I think it makes a lot of sense, and hopefully will help Aston Martin to also potentially have, just maybe even more funding potentially if they can kind of do a merger with Lucid or something. I think that could even potentially make sense as well. We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, very interesting to hear all that. And lastly, I want to give a huge thank you to all of you who are the members of the Maran Motoring Club. So we didn't have any new members join this week, but I did want to give a huge thank you and shout out to Jeremy Wang for being a member now for about 9 months or so. So huge thanks, Jeremy, for all your support over these months so far. And I really hope you're enjoying the perks and enjoying the priority answering on the live streams and all that. So for anyone else that would also like to join, get those perks. All the perks, by the way, are always listed there on the join page as well. But you can see the join buttons here on the video page and on the channel page, as well as a link in the description to check it out and join if you like. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching this weekly update. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to keep these videos coming as well. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.